Good morning, everyone. We are ready for Chapter D, which has to do with ratios and proportions. So our first lesson today, we're going to be looking at some ratios in D-1. And our first example, it says, you make flubber using the ingredients shown. Write the ratio of cold water to glue. So the recipe uses 3/2 cups of water per 2 cups of glue. So if you remember from earlier this year, we write ratios in 3 different ways. So the ratio of cold water to glue, the first way would be right here, 3/2 to 2, where we write the 2 in the middle. The second way is using the colon, and we still have 3/2 to 2. And if you remember, the third way is in fraction form. Now this looks a little bit different because there already is a fraction in the ratio. So if we wrote it in fraction form, it would be 3/2 to 2. And you can see that the numerator of the fraction is a fraction, and then the denominator is a whole number. But in order for us to interpret that value, we go ahead and use it as a fraction and we divide. So you can see right here how they have taken our 3/2 of cold water to 2 cups of glue, and then they've turned it into the division problem right here, because every fraction is a division problem. And then we know when we are dealing with fractions and we are dividing, we use same, change, flip. So here we go, we've got our same, change, flip, 3/2 times a half, and we end up with 3/4. So the multiplicative relationship, or interpreting the ratios, is 3/4. So what that means is the amount of cold water in the recipe is 3/4 the amount of glue. And you can see that's how they interpreted it right there. By taking that division of the ratio, we can see that the amount of cold water is 3/4 the amount of the glue. All right, if we take a look at our next example, we're going to be looking at equivalent ratios in a ratio table. And we talked about this earlier this year. And so we're going to take a look at this ratio table right here. And our first one is really easy because we can see to get from 3 to 12, we know that that is times 4. So you just, to get equivalence, you do the exact same thing. So I'm going to times by 4. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to do my 3/4 times 4 over 1. I can cross cancel right here, make this a 1, make this a 1, and I'm left with 3 over 1, which is 3. All right, and then our next one, we can't go directly from 12 to 15. So if we go back to that 3, we know that we can do 3 times 5 gets us to 15. So then I'm going to go back to my 3/4, and I'll do to get equivalent, we're going to do the exact same thing. If I did times 5 to get from 3 to 15, I'm going to take my 3/4 times 5. So I'm going to come over here, 3/4 times 5 over 1. And it doesn't look like I can cross cancel at all. So I end up with 15/4. And I could either put in my 15/4 right here if you wanted to change it into a mixed number. You could, of course, do that as well, and you would get your 3/4. Either of those would be fine. All right, so now this one, we've got 5/4 quarts, and we have to figure out what the cups are. So I might need to use a little bit of algebra here because I can see that 5/4 is bigger than 3/4. So I'm going to figure out, okay, 3/4 times something is going to get me to 5/4. So I'm going to use my algebra here to figure out what that question mark is. So in order to undo this multiplication, I'm going to use division. I'm going to divide by 3/4 on both sides. Divide by 3/4. But I know, of course, that I need to do my same, change, flip. So I'm going to have 5/4 times my 4 over 3. And then right here, I can cross cancel, make these 1s, and I end up with 5 times 1 and 1 times 3, so I end up with 5 thirds. So I know that to go from 3/4 all the way over here to 5/4, I timesed by 5 thirds. And I used my algebra to figure out what this question mark was by dividing by the 3/4 on both sides. And this question mark ended up being 5 thirds. So if I know 3/4 times 5 thirds is 5/4, then I take this 3 and I can times that by the 5 thirds. And I am just about out of room. I'm going to do it up here at the top. I'm going to take my 3 times my 5 thirds, put this over 1. These can be cross-canceled. And it looks like I end up with 5 over 1, which is just 5 to fill that in. All right, if we take a look at our next example here, modeling real life. You mix 1/2 cup of yellow paint for every 3/4 cups of blue paint to make 15 cups of green paint. How much yellow paint do you use? Okay, so the first thing we need to figure out is in our ratio, how much total paint have we used so far? We definitely haven't gotten up to 15 cups if our ratio is 1/2 cup to 3/4 cup. So you can see right here, we add that up, and in our ratio, that is a total of 5/4 of a cup. So our ratio is 5/4 of a cup. So then I know that 5/4 times something is going to get me to that 15 cups of the green paint that they want once it's all mixed together. So 5/4 times something equals the 15 cups of green paint. So in order for me to figure out what that is, I, of course, am going to use my algebra, and I'm going to undo that multiplication by dividing by 5/4. That cancels out. So I'm dividing by 5/4, which really means, same change, flip, 15 over 1 times 4/5. All right. So then, oh, look, I can cross cancel. I'm going to make this a 1. I'm going to make this a 3. And then when I multiply, I end up getting my 12 over 1. So what that means is that I have to take this 5/4 times 12 and I will get the 15. So now if I separate back out my 1/2 cup and my 3/4 separately, and I times those each by 12, I'll get how much yellow and how much blue. So let me go ahead and erase this work that I've already done so that I've got some room here. All right, so now I know that I am going to need to take each of these, my 1/2 times my 12 over 1, and I'm going to cross cancel, make this a 1 and make this a 6. And I know that I need 6 cups of the yellow. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the blue. I'm going to take my 3/4 times my 12 over 1. I can cross cancel again, make this a 1, make this a 3, and that gives me 9. So that means that I need 9 cups of blue. And then if I add those together, 6 plus 9 gets me equals that 15 that they wanted us to get. So now I'm going to look at that question. How much yellow paint do you use? Well, here we go. 6 cups of yellow paint would be my final answer. So once again, what I did is I added the ratio together to find out how many total cups were in the ratio. And then I used my algebra. I did my 5/4 times something has to get me to the 15 cups. Once I figured out what we're multiplying by, I separated those two out again and multiplied them to figure out how many cups. All right, you're going to go online and you're going to do just a few problems. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.